Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here. I'm so excited to be in conversation with all of you and to be joined by this powerhouse panel of speakers today. My name's Alex Murphy, and I am the political director for the Yes on 2 Alaskans for Better Elections campaign. And I'm joined by a bunch of fantastic folks here for a conversation about equity and access in our electoral systems. So we've got Joy Huntington, who is the president of Uqaqti Consulting and also part of our Yes on 2 campaign team. We've also got Joy's mother, Dorothy Shockley, who's the president and CEO of Bean Ridge Corporation. We've got Anna Kellar, the executive director of Maine Citizens for Clean Elections and the Maine League of Women Voters. We've got Cynthia Terrell, Cynthia Richie Terrell, founder and executive director of RepresentWomen, and Maria Perez, co-director of Democracy Rising and director of Fair Vote New Mexico. So thank you all so much. Like I said, today's conversation is about access and representation, and I just wanted to have a conversation about some of the barriers that folks face in participating in our electoral systems. I think we all know that our politics is not as diverse and as representative as we would like it to be. It does not reflect necessarily the diversity of thought or the diversity in general of our population, especially here in Alaska. And so we just wanted to have an open conversation about that and talk about the ways that Ballot Measure 2 hopes to address those issues and hopes to change things. And so I would like to, I guess, pass it off to Joy and Dorothy to give the Alaskan perspective and to have a conversation. Joy and Dorothy have both run for office here in Alaska and have quite a bit of experience about what folks face. And so I'm going to pass it off to you, Joy, to take it away.
Awesome, thank you. And just to give a quick context, I ran for city council in Fairbanks in 2015, and my experience is unique because, of course, at the city municipal level, we didn't have parties, and so you're really able to, in those elections, run on your character, your merit, your experiences. And I ended up being, I didn't have any opponents, and so it was kind of a fun victory lap election or campaign. But then, once I got elected, I really did experience what it's like when you are there based on, that experience and your vision for your community or for your state. And so my experience is kind of the opposite of my mom's. And I think that's why I wanted to sort of start with that before I ask her about her experience running for state house and state senate in Alaska. And she also worked in Juneau for 8 years for a senator. And so she kind of saw the pros and cons of when we elect people in the current system that we have, and what it's like in Juneau. So and I've been involved in elections and campaigns in Alaska for 14 years since I graduated from college in 2006. So have definitely seen a lot here, and have seen worked across the state with our Native communities that definitely feel very, I think, not a part of the bigger picture of our state when it comes to our politics and our decisions being made. So certainly excited to hear from everybody today. And Mom, I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit about your state house campaign in particular. That was just after redistricting in Alaska. And so she had the fun experience of running as an independent candidate with 2 incumbents in one district. And one incumbent was Republican and one incumbent was Democrat. And that was a new district that encompassed, like, I don't know, you can share how many Native communities were in that district. Of course, we have a very large state, so geographically, we have very unique challenges here as well. And then populations are spread out, and our Native communities are very spread out, and sometimes have, a certain community will have a very low number of people. So my mom was running in that district as an independent, and she was the only Native person and the only woman on that ballot, but running against 2 incumbents in a very large district as an independent. And Mom, can you talk a little bit about that experience and what kind of what that was like as an independent. And it was a very uphill battle, I know. So can you please share about that?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet everyone on the panel and of course in Facebook land. Thank you. Just a little background. Like Joy said, I worked in Juneau and so saw firsthand the bipartisan or the partisanship and how that detours, policies and work in regards to what needs to be done in the legislature. The first 2 years we were in the minority, but then after redistricting in 2010, or no, after redistricting, after the election in 2006, it was a split Senate. So we had 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats. And so they formed a coalition. And it was amazing how when both, people are working together, how the atmosphere in the Capitol building changed. I mean, it was drastic. And it was so much better working and working together. So just from that experience, when in 2012 decided to run for the House seat, the new House seat that went from Fairbanks all the way to the coast, which included Scammon Bay, Hooper Bay, and Cheevac. So, and I chose to run nonpartisan, and I use nonpartisan because I don't want to get mixed up with the other party, which is independent. And I was really discouraged not to, but I just felt in my heart I needed to because of the partisanship that I saw, and we really needed I guess you want to call it independent voice, but one that's not associated with the party, but with the people. And like I said, I was running against a couple of people that were already there, and it was tough. It was really tough because you don't get any support from anywhere. You're on your own. And the number one thing you have to do is, get the signatures to get on the ballot, and then, the work begins. So it was tough. It was really tough. And like I said, I was really discouraged from doing it. People said if I had run, as a Democrat, I would have had, better chances. But in my heart, I just didn't want to. So that was my experience. It was, you didn't have to campaign. I, probably run again, but it was tough. Thank you.
If I could just ask a few more questions about that, Mom. When you were out in the villages and, people saw that there was an option for, voting for a Native woman and, having, what were those conversations like? And I think, as for people on the panel, Hooper Bay and Scammon Bay are out on the coast of Alaska, and definitely, the sense of isolation and just, we have, our villages are, wonderful places and, very rich history and amazing people out there that have to work very hard for everything. You don't get anything, whether it's in some communities where me and my mom lived, if you wanted, to take a bath, you had to go haul all the water and, do all of this work to be able to do that. And so, you're getting your wood, your water, your food. And so it's a lot of hard work. And I think in Alaska, we have, definitely there's an urban rural divide. I'm sure in many states there's, kind of distinct parts that feels like you're either on one side or the other, and sometimes one side seems to have all of the voting power, and so then you kind of feel disenfranchised. And again, the rural communities have also the distance and other challenges with getting the services that they need. There's not public safety readily available usually. If there's an accident in the community, you have to call and get, an airplane will come out, and it sometimes takes hours to have someone that could be have critical injuries get the help that they need. And so they absolutely need, voices and representation in Juneau that understand those challenges. And so, Mom, when you were, I know she, it's tough when a lot of the people that win those elections in the rural parts of the state are pilots, and they have airplanes because to visit those communities, it costs a lot of money. Honestly, I could fly to Seattle for much cheaper than flying across Alaska. So it's very the financial challenges of campaigning in Alaska is really difficult. And so like my mom said, if you want to run kind of as an independent voice or as a nonpartisan because you strongly feel that way, and you don't have the financial backing of a party, and you don't have the financial, you don't have access to an airplane and a pilot, that becomes even more difficult. And so, but she did campaign. And I think that year I'm very proud of her because she got the most votes per dollar raised in her campaign. And so, she was, it was an uphill, just with the two incumbents, and the real strength in numbers was on one corner of the district, which was a part of Fairbanks, which had a very strong incumbent with that little pocket of that huge district. Population wise, all the villages in it were, it was difficult to kind of offset that one part of the district that had a really dense population and a really strong incumbent. But for Mom, she raised, for the money that she raised, she got the most votes across the state for per dollar, which I was very proud of. But and so she was able to visit some of the communities, but when you were going door to door, Mom, and people kind of saw that there was, somebody that understood their challenges and could represent them in Juneau, what were those conversations like?
That was the best part.
Oh,
I loved door to door, and I loved meeting people. They were so generous. Working in Juneau those 8 years, I saw the misrepresentation, especially in rural Alaska. The legislators who are in Juneau and Anchorage and Fairbanks, they sit in their little districts compared to rural Alaska and those districts. And, to them, everything's fine. And you get out to Arctic Village or Scammon Bay or Hooper Bay and Numa-Iqua and, all of those places, and things are not okay. And so, I just loved going door to door, talking to people. Like I said, they were so generous. I got moose meat, I got berries, I got all kinds of things. And people who couldn't give money, gave food, gave, whatever they had. And it was just so awesome. I just loved it. That's, all I could do. I mean, that's what I would continue to do too. And, it was awesome. They were, in one village I'd never been to, I think it was Kotlik, the people were so excited. I was like a relative coming to their community, to see a native and to see a woman. People just opened their arms and their hearts, and it was awesome to see. I just loved that. And, like Joyce said, there was, it's tough now. you know, with the redistricting, with people migrating to the community, to larger cities, you know, the population, they have to make the districts, especially in rural Alaska, much bigger. And a large population comes from Fairbanks. And, you know, that's happened in my other race as well. So, yeah, it's, you know, not, I mean, unfortunately, you have people that, you know, won't to vote for a woman. And that's in the Native population as well. And there are people who will not vote for a person of color as well. You know, so it's a challenge for sure. But one, I think that, you know, I definitely have hope for, and you know, with this ballot measure, hopefully we can make some great changes with that.
Thank you, Mom, for answering that question. And I'll just ask another really quick one. You know, in her time in Juneau, and in the time I've been also working in Juneau over probably the last maybe 12 years or so. And I was just wanting to ask her about what the representation of Alaska Native women was there while you were the 8 years that you were in Juneau working. And I've heard stories of, you know, and it's not necessarily the urban legislators' fault that they don't know more about the villages or about, I mean, it's just they haven't been exposed to that necessarily. And so I don't want to make it seem like there's a grudge against the villages. And sometimes it feels that way, or maybe certain people have predisposed, you know, thoughts about the villages or about Alaska Natives. But I think often they just haven't really experienced it out there. They don't really know what it's like. And I heard, and I think maybe on the floor or something in Juneau, where a legislator didn't realize or didn't know that there were like 6,200 homes in Alaska without running water. And they were like, really? Like that's a thing? And you know, just people just don't, you know, if it's not your day-to-day life, you just don't know. And so and then expecting those leaders to make decisions that, you know, adequately address the needs in the villages when they don't know what's happening out there, like my mom said, is just you know, it's not really realistic. So Mom, do you want to speak? I know we want to transition the panel and hear from our other wonderful ladies on the call here, but can you talk briefly about the just the representation of Alaska Natives and of women in Juneau when you were there for 8 years?
Yes, it was very discouraging. Every day, you know, Senator Uqaqti, I have to give him so much credit. He was not only the only office that had all Alaska Native staff, but you know, the one thing that was primarily, well, not only representing the largest district in the nation, but we were constantly educating legislators, people, of issues, of you know, the many needs in rural Alaska. And that's the other thing, you know, each district, no matter the size, get the same amount of funds. So when, you know, you have your budget, but then you also have discretionary funds sometimes. And so let's say we had $1 million in discretionary funds. And so each district would get that. And so Fairbanks, Anchorage, Juneau, you know, would get these. And sometimes they would get, you know, depending on how many legislators they had or senators, you know, they get, you know, $5-10 million. But in our district, where we had over 100 communities, you know, we would get, you know, the same amount of money and have to spread it across, you know, this huge region. And there was just so much more need in these communities versus, you know, the district or the neighborhood in Fairbanks or Anchorage or Juneau. And so, you know, we were constantly fighting for, you know, safe water, you know, just simple things like books and, you know, education and transportation and you name it, all of the basic needs in rural Alaska compared to the wants in the cities. You know, and we could only fund maybe 10 to 20 communities per year. So we'd have to do a rotation. You know, every year we would look at who got funded the past year and who can, you know, who can we fund this year and what the priorities were. And, you know, some schools, we'd give like $10,000 and it was like Christmas to them, you know, to get the, you know, those funds because they didn't have enough money for books and those kinds of things. So, you know, it was constant education, educating legislators, staff, people coming in and out of the Capitol building, you know, and we had, like I said, all Native staff. I think every Native person that came into the Capitol made sure they visited us. And then that was the other thing, you know, I think we had, how many school districts are there in the state? But we had, I think, 80% of all the school districts in the state too. I mean, you know, it's just, it's tough, but, you know, very important. You know, you look at the Bush Caucus today, no women, you know, well, I guess there is one now, but, you know, I look at it and every year it's like, we have to make changes. We need more women. And as far as the whole House and Senate, you know, it's just so discouraging to see, you know, the people that, God bless them, but, you know, who are actually, you know, making decisions for us. You know, when we can have our own voice in the legislature, it's so important. I just can't stress enough how important it is that we get more women, and especially more people, you know, from rural Alaska as well. You know, Alaska Native, we need that representation. You know, it's 2020, you know, we can have our own voice, and we do. We just need to elect people and help. I mean, you know, that's the other thing. We aren't helping, you know, supporting our Alaska Native women and our women of color. You know, we really, really need to do more and really stand behind them, especially, you know, the nonpartisan. We need, you know, independent thinkers. We have to put people first before the party. I mean, the parties are just destroying, and I think the change, you know, change is the constant in this world, and we have to recognize that and to move with it, you know, to move with the change that is happening. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dorothy. And I do just want to ask you, Joy, one more question. I mean, I think to this point of what we've been talking about with how our elected officials, whether they represent the population of Alaska. So when you look at the data from the Division of Elections, about 40% of Alaskans identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and yet only a little more than 16% of registered candidates identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And so you're looking at a third, right, of what it should be. And you can take that and apply it across many different identities. You could look at women. I think we all are here because we know that it's not what it should be or what it could be. And so I wanted to ask you, Joy, what are some of the barriers? Why is it hard for women, for Native people? What are some of the barriers facing folks in getting involved and getting registered? And we spoke a little bit about Alaska's, very diverse landscape and why it's physically tough to reach people. But I wonder if you can speak at all to your experience as a woman and as an Alaska Native woman. What are some of the invisible barriers that folks are facing? And then, hopefully we'll open this up and talk about how we fix it, because that's really what Ballot Measure 2 is about, right? It's about, we have these tools and we know what they are, and we know how successful they are. So excited to open that up. But just to you, Joy, would love to hear your experience.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, I think and my mom did mention the word hope, which I think is also why we're all here, because if we didn't have hope, we wouldn't be doing the jobs that we're doing and we wouldn't be engaged the way that we are. So thank you for sharing your experiences, Mom. I think that really did kind of give a really clear story and experiences to kind of, really frame what we're talking about today. And in my experiences, I think, as my mom talked about, it's very discouraging when I think if you look at our voter base and why we're not participating as much as we could be. I think our voter turnout, is not the greatest in our communities and with our Alaska Natives. And I've worked on Get Out the Native Vote efforts in our state for several years. And we try so hard every election to get people to show up. And I think over time, that sense of discouragement that my mom talked about, whether it's not, having the numbers to elect the people that we need to elect, then maybe we just don't show up next time. Or, once you get to Juneau, if you've somehow made it through all those hoops and you somehow got to Juneau, you got elected, then once you get there, also being limited because of the party dynamics or because of just having low numbers. Once you get to Juneau, you might only have, one other Alaska Native woman in 40 members in the state house, 20 senators that we have. If there's only 2 Alaska Native women, it's not like you get there and you shake things up on day one. It's this long process of educating people and building those relationships with other legislators. And so once you factor in, all of that, and the number of people that may have been really excited about creating change in our state, might just see that it's a long shot to get there. And especially if you choose not to go the party route, as my mom has experienced, it just makes it so much more difficult. And so I think, there's if you don't have, maybe the resources to go and continue, and again, the patience to work within a system that might not be empowering you. It might be an uphill battle once you get there. I feel like, those are a few of the issues. And then just our geographic, challenges. And, not having if I had an airplane and I could just fly around the state, and luckily several of our Native legislators do have airplanes and they do fly, and they are able to visit their entire district during campaigns. But, I think if people had that, kind of equity in the resources that are needed to run in our rural districts, that it would also be a different story. So I think those are a few of the barriers, and getting out, building that voter morale and participation is so important, because if that 40% was showing up at the polls and we saw our vote really making a difference, then I feel like they might be more excited about running. Because, okay, we've got power, we've got a voter base that participates. I'm gonna put my name on this ballot next time because I have a chance. And if you don't, then what's the point, especially when you're going to get put through the runner in our sometimes very hostile and negative elections and campaigns, which I also just don't think are necessary to go that route. But that's another panel for another day.
Absolutely. Well, and that segues really well into this conversation and opening it up to our other panelists. Maria, I'd like to invite you in to talk a little bit about your experience expanding ranked choice voting in New Mexico with Fair Vote. I know that you did a lot of work on the ground to educate voters and make sure that they understood how ranked choice voting worked, and would love to just hear a little bit about your experience, the reception that folks had, and how they felt about it, and what changes you've seen.
So yeah, thank you for doing this today and for inviting me. My name is Maria Perez, and I'm based in New Mexico. I've been working in New Mexico as well as in other states for quite some time, specifically around the issue of voter education on ranked choice voting. So I guess the first thing that I want to say is that when you're talking to voters about not just ranked choice voting, but any kind of election reform, we have to remember that most people don't think about elections at all, right? Like maybe they think, oh, there's an election coming up, but that's about it. Like most people are not thinking about like, wait, what are the mechanics? How does this actually work? How do the votes get tabulated? What are the percentages? Are we talking about a true majority or like are we talking about relative majorities? Like people don't really think about that. So we really should not talk to people about those things because it's just a complete disconnect. When we are talking to folks, particularly grown-ups, right? We're talking about voters. When you talk about grown-ups about anything, it needs to be something that they somehow connect with and care about. So when I talk to voters about ranked choice voting, when I talk to voters about, just systems of representation, it really is important and effective to lead from values. What do people care about, right? Maybe people care about the fact that their communities are falling apart and that politicians have never done anything for them. Maybe people can relate to the fact that they've maybe never had anybody come knock on their door because they live in a Native community or they live in a Latinx community, and their either votes are taken for granted or people just don't care and assume that most folks are not going to vote to begin with. So always lead with values, right? What is important to this person that you're talking to? You're not going to learn that unless you ask them that question. You can't make assumptions. So when you're talking to voters, spend 70% of the time listening to what they have to say and 30% of the time talking to them. Talking at people is also a very bad way of engaging folks. Always have like follow-up questions, always have a follow-up action, right? When you wrap up a conversation, say, thank you so much, I've learned so much, I'm going to follow up with you, and then follow up with them. Another thing that I would like to say that that has proven very effective in educating voters, particularly around ranked choice voting, here in New Mexico and elsewhere, is to partner with organizations and civic groups on the ground that have nothing to do with voting or elections, right? So as an example, really concrete example, when we were doing the work here in my home city of Santa Fe, New Mexico, around ranked choice voting implementation, I partner very closely with a local organization that works on transportation and housing justice, right? This is their jam. They talk, they want to have a just transit and they want to have housing for people. They don't really get engaged in electoral stuff, but they have, they have canvassers, they do door knocking campaigns, and they are well connected in the neighborhoods, right? So we partnered, and what we decided to do, the best way to educate that constituency of that group was to create a ranked ballot around the issues that their organization cares about. So when we had canvassers go out and knock on doors, they weren't talking about ranked choice voting. They weren't talking about elections. They were saying like, hey, can you please fill out this it has 5 issues around housing and transportation. Can you please rank them in the order that they're important to you? And people would rank the thing. The organization got really crucial data for their own organizational needs. But when they wrapped up that conversation, they would say, awesome, this is great. By the way, there's an election coming up in a few weeks. Your ballot is going to look exactly like this. Voters were educated. Everybody got what they needed without having to get into the weeds of policy around electoral reform and such. So meet the people where they're at. Remember that people don't really care or think about elections. I mean, maybe more now in terms of this like presidential election that's coming up, there's like a lot at stake there. But in general, people are not election policy wonks, right? So talk to them in ways and about issues that they actually care about, and then wedge in your issue relating to that. Mm-hmm. As far as the second part of your question, the sort of like the impact that I've seen here in Santa Fe, also in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is another city that implemented ranked choice voting since I've been working on this in the state. The impact is really, we haven't had a lot of election cycles, but the impact is already something we can see. So the voter turnout was higher for the elections in both of these cities. We did exit polls on voter experience with the ranked choice election, and those were very positive. Voters ranked most of the candidates. They got excited about it, right? They turned out. The other thing I will say is that the governing bodies that were elected through ranked choice voting have changed, both in Santa Fe and in Las Cruces. In Santa Fe, as far as you know, like diversity, like ethnic diversity, it has remained the same. We are a minority majority city, and our council, our governing body, mirrors that. But we have now a majority women on the council, which we didn't have before ranked choice voting. And I haven't done the math exactly, but the median age of our council dropped by like 20 years, right? So we have young public health folks, we have young sort of a community organizer folks on the council, and that's been a result of ranked choice voting. In Las Cruces, I have to say the impact was really tremendous after just one cycle of ranked choice voting. And so in 2017, before ranked choice voting, the council in Las Cruces was 43% white. And after ranked choice voting, that's turned to 14% white, right? This is also a minority majority city. So that is huge, from 43% to 14%. The council before ranked choice voting was 71% male, and now it's 43% male. And 71% before were over the age of 45. So it was like an old governing body, and now it's 43% over the age of 45. So in all of these sort of like indicators, after just one cycle, the Las Cruces Council changed significantly. Of note also in Las Cruces was the implementation happened on a mayoral election, right? The mayor, who eventually did get reelected for his 4th term, in the 2 elections prior, he basically had no opposition, right? I think he ran unopposed one time and he had like one opponent the other time. Mm-hmm. Because ranked choice voting was implemented, there was 10 people running for mayor this year, right? So like there's all these folks who felt like I can throw my hat in, I have a chance, and I'm definitely not gonna ruin anything. I'm not gonna split the vote, I'm not gonna spoil anything. I'm gonna give it a shot. And 10 people entered the race. So to me, that also is speaks to how election reform, like ranked choice voting, really like opens up the field for people who might not feel comfortable or confident in running for office, but who really care about their communities, to say, screw it, I'm gonna try it.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, it's hard to argue with those numbers. And those are the people that we want to be running anyway, right? We don't want seasoned politicians who know how to play the game. We want people who truly represent their constituencies, who know the issues, who know not only what the issues are, but what solutions will work for their communities. I mean, this is it seems so common sense, but our system is really not set up in a way that supports that. So I'd like to just turn it over to you, Cynthia, and talk a little bit about your organization, Represent Women. Fantastic organization, making sure that women are running, winning, serving, and leading. So can you talk a little bit about your experience and particularly what about our current system disadvantages certain communities when they do run, and what holds people back from being successful?
Sure. Thank you so much. Really glad to be part of this impressive conversation. Really interesting to hear everybody's perspectives. The frame that I bring to this work is trying to look at the institutional and structural barriers that really impede women and people of color, younger people, as Maria rightly included, in the political process. And you know, we have a super antiquated, old election system. We inherited it from a colonial power 240 years ago, and part of the design of that system is really to limit competition and to protect incumbents. And when you have a system like that, it's very hard for challengers to win. And when incumbents are mostly white and male and old, you can have a pipeline of 100 million qualified women who've been quote unquote trained, though that's not a term I'm really fond of, to run for office. But if you don't have an institution that really allows them to succeed when they run, then the barrier is going to continue. And there are four main areas that we look at. One are, what are the barriers to women getting recruited to run in the first place? Do parties support them? And I was really interested to hear Dorothy and Joy talking about the decision of how to affiliate when you're a candidate and what's going to get you support, and is the party going to pay attention to you? And then you saw the split vote in your races, Dorothy. I was doing a little research on your races, and when there's more than two candidates running, you're going to have split votes in any race, and people are discouraged from running. So what are the rules around norms around parties supporting candidates, particularly women and people of color? Are donors and political action committees giving money to those candidates so they can run viable campaigns? We have some solutions for that. Then the second bucket are, what are the impediments that keep women from winning when they run? We've talked about some of them, but and Maria just touched on some as well. But this antiquated voting system, as I said, protects incumbents. It splits votes among like-minded candidates. We see this in race after race, where women and people of color are sometimes discouraged from running, but when they do run, many people want to vote for them. And if there are 10 people running, that means votes are split among those candidates. So that's a problem, and that's where ranked choice voting comes in. And it turns out ranked choice voting, while really gaining momentum in the United States, a version of that or that same system is used in a number of countries around the world. And it's no surprise that 85 countries rank above the United States in women's representation, which is pretty staggering. 20 years ago, the United States ranked 46th. And sometimes when I say that, people say, well, that can't be right. I'm like, no. It's not that the women, we've all become less competent or something. It's that other countries have innovated, essentially. They've addressed these structural barriers. They haven't cloned better women, they've cloned better systems. And so that's the work that I'm trying to do, is trying to emulate that. So we've talked about recruitment targets and donation targets. We've talked about systems like ranked choice voting so they can win. It's also important, and boy, I was glad to hear what Dorothy and Joy had to say about this, because it really resonates with our work. You've got to look at the legislative measures and practices and norms that are used. Can people vote by proxy? Can you telecommute and participate electronically? Is there on-site childcare? Is there paid leave? Are there full-time legislative sessions which somebody could make a career or a job out of? Or is it, so many state legislatures meet for just 2 months of a year, and some not every year? What lower income person who's doing a lot of other things in their life, supporting a family, et cetera, can work for just 2 months? That has to be addressed. So those are norms around women's ability to serve. And then norms around leadership selection processes. Who gets to run a campaign? Who gets to be a party leader? Who gets to be a vice presidential candidate? Who gets appointed to a cabinet? Who gets appointed to staff positions? All those things executives have the power to name people, as we just saw presidential candidate Biden do with Kamala Harris. And that's an opportunity to name women, people of color, younger people to these positions of power, so they're more able, better equipped to be considered for candidates for statewide executive office and other races. So that, in a nutshell, we think those interventions to run, to win, to serve and lead, to change the institutional barriers is really sort of the magic elixir that we really haven't focused on in this country. We've been preparing a lot of terrific women to run for office. Now we've got to prepare the institutions so they can win when they run.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, absolutely. It's about structural change, right? We've definitely got the capable candidates. It's about creating a system that allows and encourages them to be participating in it. So it's 9:45 here in Alaska, and I could just talk for hours with you all, but I want to give a chance to Anna to talk a little bit about your experience implementing ranked choice voting in Maine, what the reception was. If you could just speak a bit about what changes you've observed, and I think to all of these points that we've been talking about, what does equity really look like in our electoral process, and what does that mean to you? Oh, and we've got you on, you're on mute, so just, there we go.
So with Maine's elections, we're about to head into our fourth election where statewide candidates, second general election, where we've had statewide candidates elected using ranked choice voting. And each of those elections has had some really great stories of people running who wouldn't have been able to run if not for ranked choice voting. And it has changed the flavor of those campaigns. Whereas before, if someone who was not a mainstream party candidate or was seen as not the candidate who was the establishment choice within the party would run, they'd get a lot of backlash, and their supporters would get a lot of backlash for distracting from electability or potentially becoming a spoiler. And we don't see that anymore. And it makes the entire political process for everyone involved, whether they're supporting those candidates or not, a more pleasant experience. And so I've watched a few real firsts happen over the course of these last 2 years, so Maine has elected its first woman governor. We don't use ranked choice voting in the general election, but she was the winner out of a 7-person Democratic primary that used ranked choice voting. We also are having the first use of ranked choice voting for a US Senate race this time. And there are 4 candidates, Democrat, a Republican, and 2 independents. 3 of the 4 are women. And in the Democratic primary for that Senate race this summer, we had 2 women and a non-binary candidate run. The first non-binary candidate to run for federal office anywhere in the country. They're a defense attorney and ran on a platform of criminal justice reform and money and politics reform that was taken much more seriously, talked about in the debates, and brought forward to a degree that wouldn't have been in that race if they hadn't been running, and people were able to rank them as the first choice and someone else as the second choice. And I heard about people ranking, 1, 2, 3, all of their choices, and having really informed debates with each other about which of these candidates had the better chance in the general election, and then which of them did they really love and want to see, would love to see being our senator. And those 2 things didn't have to be in opposition. They could both be things that were in your mind. So it made a big difference for us in that experience of being a voter, as well as being a candidate. I'm also excited that in this election, as well as our US Senate race, we are having 2 firsts, one big and one small. I live in Portland, Maine, and we're having our first use of ranked choice voting for our city council and school board races. And we have a 4-person race for an at-large district. And one of those 4 candidates is an Indigenous woman who would be the first Indigenous person elected in Portland. Really excited to see her having this chance in this citywide seat. And then we have the first time that we'll be able to vote for president using ranked choice voting. And this has been narrowly on the ballot, but we are so excited about it. And compared to years where you just, I know friendships that have been destroyed by people arguing about someone voting for a third-party candidate. We don't have to have that argument this year, and it frees up so much energy for doing the real work of politics, and can help people re-engage in a positive way with our elections. We'll have a write-in candidate as well as the candidates on the ballot. And I'm excited that people who really want to vote for a person of color for president could choose to write in Mark Charles and Adrienne Wallace as their ticket without worrying that by doing so, they would be losing their chance to have an impact on the real winner of the election. So it changes so much about your experience as a voter, and where we've seen the impact of it has been, I think, an increase in people being able to run and not be seen as a negative factor when they enter the race in a way that so harms people of color, women, other minority groups. When they're even getting into the race is seen as harmful. We don't have to have that, and it has made a really big difference for us.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you all, but gosh, I've had so many conversations in the last couple of months of who do you really want to vote for and who will you vote for, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. I think that's a bet that everybody has to hedge within the current structure that we have, is what's possible and what really inspires me, and what do I want to turn out for at the polls. In every other area of our life, we have competition, we have healthy competition, and we rank our preferences, right? If you're a vegetarian and you go to a restaurant and you say, I'll have the tofu, and they say, well, we don't have it, we're going to give you the steak. That never happens, right? Like in every other sphere, we're able to have a better option as opposed to the complete opposite of what we wanted. So why wouldn't we have that in our elections? And so ballot measure 2, for anyone who's tuning in, whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook Live, ballot measure 2 is a 3-fold electoral reform. It would open up our primaries here in Alaska so that the top 4 vote getters move on to the general election, so that all voters have access to our primary candidates, so that you don't have to pick whether you identify as a Democrat, Republican. You have access to all of the candidates. The second reform is obviously ranked choice voting, which we focus pretty heavily on here, and which I think we can all agree is a fantastic tool to increase representation, to support greater participation, both of candidates and of voters, right? We're going to have more folks running. We're going to have more diversity of thought in our leaders and in the ideas and the solutions that we're bringing to the table. And we're also going to have more voters turning out because they're inspired and they feel like their voice matters and their vote matters. So that's fantastic. And the other aspect of ballot measure 2 is campaign finance reform and ending dark money influence in our elections. So I am wary that we're coming up at the hour, and I did want to leave a brief moment for Q&A. I don't know if we will have much time for it, but I also wanted to give an opportunity to Joy, because she's on our team and is excited about that ballot measure 2. And I wonder if you wanted to speak at all a little bit, Joy, about why you're personally supporting it.
Yes, absolutely. And again, for me, it comes down to voter morale as well. And, being discouraged to participate because the person that you want to vote for will probably not win, and you'll probably take votes away from like the more realistic candidates. And so, when we see someone on the ballot, like in my mom's situation, that really does represent you in those relationships that she was building and people opening their hearts to her and so excited about her going to Juneau and representing them. But a vote for her, may not, just because of the three-way race and the party system, that was, they may have, worried about the strategy around that. And so really opening up for our voters to be able to vote for who they want to vote for, and then for candidates to be able to, put their names in without being afraid of tilting things in the wrong direction or in a direction that they don't want our state to go in, inadvertently. And so I feel like, really building that strength in our rural communities and for women across the state and for people of color and Alaska Natives to really strengthen their vote and build that morale and motivation to participate, whether it's at the polls or on election day as candidates. I really want to, kind of revitalize elections in our state and really give the power back to the people. And again, we're sending, great people to Juneau, but once they get there, they may not be motivated, or they may not have the tools once they get there to really create the change that they want to, because it's so much really, it comes down to your party affiliation, unfortunately, most of the time. And we're limiting really great people, whether those are people of color or people that aren't of color. I feel like, they may have great ideas, but just not have the tools once they are elected. But I feel like ballot measure 2 really will incentivize the candidates to have faith that, they have to continue doing work that will help, the majority of the state, especially if they're in like a governor's election, because they're working for that second choice vote, right? They're not just working for their own party's vote. They're hoping to be the people, maybe the other party's second choice versus somebody else. And so I think that's just a different incentive and a different motivation that will hopefully, send people to Juneau that represent us, like kind of the people that, we have in our state, our populations, our demographics, and also give them the tools once they get there to work together and to create solutions that are really going to pull us through these challenges that we have. And I don't think status quo is doing that. I think we're limiting people and we're limiting our options and our access. And I want to strengthen that and really pave the way for amazing people like my mother and others to not only run, but to get elected.
Absolutely. And like you, Joy. Well, thank you so much. I don't think that we have any questions from what I can see, but I just want to say thank you each so much for taking some time today to be in this conversation with us. Really exciting to hear about all of the work that you're doing, and we're excited to have your support as we head into the general election. For everyone who's tuning in from Alaska, please vote yes on ballot measure 2. Visit our website, find us on Facebook. We're on social media. We've got a lot of these events coming up from now through the election to talk about the different aspects of ballot measure 2. And we need your help to get engaged and get involved. So please reach out, find us, ask us questions if you have them. And thank you so much to all of our panelists this morning. Have a wonderful Wednesday. And yes, thank you.
It was so nice to meet everybody. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and look forward to hopefully connecting with you in the future.
Likewise, I'd really enjoy that. Thank you. Good luck to you and you, Dorothy. And of course, Anna and Maria as well. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Yes. Good luck. We're rooting for you.
Thanks, everybody.